I'm Natalie Carter, 34 years old, and I bought my 3-bedroom townhouse the hard way, with long hours, canceled vacations, and 6 straight years of telling myself that peace was worth every sacrifice. So when my father sent a text that said, "Family dinner tonight, 6 p.m. sharp," I knew it wasn't really dinner. In my family, a message like that usually meant someone had already made a decision and was just waiting for me to sit down so they could pretend I had a choice. The moment I walked into the restaurant, I could feel it. My mother's eyes were red, the breadbasket sat untouched, and the air around the table felt thick, like everyone had rehearsed their lines except me. I hadn't even taken off my coat before my father cleared his throat and started talking about hard times, children needing stability, and how some people in this family had more room than they needed. Then it landed exactly the way I thought it would. They had all decided that my brother, his wife, and their kids were moving into my house because, as my mother put it, I had extra bedrooms and no real reason to keep them to myself. I said no, calmly at first, then more clearly. That was when my mother leaned forward and snapped, "Shut up. That's your responsibility." Beside her, my brother smiled like he had already won, like my front door was already his, like my life was just another bill the family expected me to pay. I looked around that table, at the tears, the entitlement, the nerve of people volunteering my home as if I were not even sitting there, and something inside me went completely still. Then I stood up, reached into my bag for my phone, and said, "Then I guess this is the perfect time for a surprise. Before I show you what happened next, and why that entire table went silent the second my screen lit up, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now, because I have a feeling this story is going to travel a lot farther than my family ever expected." The smile vanished from my brother's face the second I unlocked my phone and turned the screen toward the center of the table. I did not rush it. I wanted everyone there to feel exactly what I had felt the first time I watched the footage alone in my kitchen. The video opened on the front view of my townhouse in the middle of a bright Tuesday afternoon, the timestamp clear in the corner, my porch looking as quiet and normal as it always did when I was away for work. Then he appeared. He walked up my path, looked over his shoulder once, and pulled a key out of his pocket. Not a knock, not a text, not a call. Just a copied key sliding straight into my lock like my house belonged to him. My mother made a choking sound beside me, but I kept the video playing. The next clip was from the hallway camera. He moved through my house with the confidence of someone who had already been there before, went straight into my office, then into my bedroom, then back again carrying my work laptop, the velvet jewelry box my grandmother left me, the small lockbox where I kept emergency cash, and my tablet. He never hesitated once. He knew where everything was. He knew how long he had. He knew exactly what he was doing. Then I played the driveway clip with audio. He loaded everything into his trunk and laughed into his phone. "Just a few more things and we can get the cards paid down," he said. The whole table went dead silent. His wife turned so fast I thought she might throw up right there. "What cards?" she whispered. He opened his mouth, but I pulled up another clip before he could lie. Same week, same copied key, same careful look over his shoulder. This time, he came out of my garage with a tool case and a boxed espresso machine I had not even realized was missing yet. My father finally found his voice and said we needed to discuss this privately. I looked him dead in the eye and said, "You were comfortable discussing my house publicly, so I think we can survive discussing his theft the same way." My mother started crying loudly, the kind of crying that always came out whenever she needed the room to move away from what actually happened. "Natalie, why would you do this here?" she said. And that told me everything. Not why had her son copied my key. Not why had he been stealing from me for weeks. Just why was I forcing them to see it? His wife pushed her chair back from the table and stared at him like a stranger. "You told me your severance was covering us," she said. You told me payroll got messed up. He stood up fast and reached for her arm, but she jerked away before he touched her. I pulled the printed inventory from my bag and slid it across the table toward my father. Laptop, 2,100. Jewelry, appraised at 5,400. Emergency cash, 1,800. Tablet and accessories, 1,200. Over $10,000. And that does not include the locks I had to change or the cameras I installed, because things kept disappearing. My brother looked sick now, but not ashamed, just scared. That was when I knew he still thought this was about getting caught, not about what he had done. My mother grabbed my wrist and begged me not to call the police. He made a mistake, she whispered. I pulled my hand back and said, forgetting my birthday is a mistake. Taking a copied key into my house 3 times is a crime. Then I looked straight at my brother and gave him the only mercy he was getting from me. You have 24 hours, I said. Walk into a police station and tell the truth yourself, or I turn over every file I have. His face drained of color. Natalie, please do not do this. I stood up, picked up my bag, and said the words I had needed to say for years. I am not the one doing this. I am just the one finally refusing to clean it up. The drive home should have felt dramatic, but it did not. It felt quiet, clear, final. For the first time in years, I was not rearranging my own anger to make space for everybody else's excuses. I unlocked my front door, checked every camera feed, and sat down at my kitchen island with my laptop. Then I got to work. I created a folder with every clip, every timestamp, every screenshot, every receipt I still had for the things he stole. I listed the missing items by value, attached serial numbers, backed up the files to cloud storage, then copied everything to an external drive. If anyone tried to call me emotional, vindictive, or dramatic later, I wanted facts lined up so neatly they could choke on them. Around 9 that night, the texts started. My mother first. Please think of the children. My father next. We need to discuss this rationally. Then my brother. I panicked. I was desperate. I can fix this. Please do not ruin my life. I did not answer any of them. I muted the entire thread and kept working. Then another message came in from his wife. I did not know, she wrote. I swear to you, I did not know. I stared at that one a little longer. At dinner, the shock on her face had looked real. Now it felt even more real. I typed back, I believe you. Her response came immediately. I took the kids to my sister's house. He keeps saying he was going to replace everything before you noticed. I leaned back in my chair and laughed once under my breath, not because it was funny, but because it was pathetic. That was exactly the kind of excuse a man gives when he has lived too long in a family that always moves faster to protect him than to hold him accountable. He really thought the problem was timing. Not the copied key, not my bedroom, not my house. Just timing. I texted her back and told her to protect herself and the kids first. Then I turned my phone face down and kept organizing evidence until after midnight. The funny thing about anger is that once it stops being hot, it becomes useful. Mine turned into order. By 1 in the morning, every file was labeled. By 2, every item had a price beside it. By 3, I was not thinking about dinner anymore. I was thinking about patterns. My brother had always been the one with hard luck, the one who just needed one more chance, the one who always had a reason. And I had always been the one expected to understand. I remembered being 26 and asking my father for a small loan when my car died right before I got a better job offer. He had looked me straight in the face and said, "Adults solve their own problems." I remembered working weekends, skipping vacations, and living on takeout noodles while I saved for this house, and not one person at that dinner table had offered me a dime then. But the minute I had something peaceful and stable in mine, Suddenly, everyone remembered I was family. By the next evening, the 24 hours were almost up. I spent the day pretending to work while watching the clock. At 6:01, my doorbell rang. I checked the camera feed before moving. It was my father, standing alone on my porch in the same pressed shirt he had worn to dinner, except now he looked tired around the mouth. I opened the door but did not invite him in. "Where is he?" I asked. My father sighed. "He is at home." I nodded once. So he made his choice. He glanced past me into the hallway, maybe expecting the old version of me to appear if he just waited long enough. "Natalie, let me come in. We need to talk." "You have 2 minutes," I said. He stepped inside and stood awkwardly in my living room, surrounded by furniture and quiet he had always dismissed as selfish because it belonged to me alone. He tried concern first. "He is scared." "Good," I said. "He should be." Then he tried guilt. "Think about the children." I looked at him and felt something in me settle even deeper. "I am thinking about them," I said. "I am thinking about what kind of adults they will become if everyone around them teaches them that stealing from family is something other people are supposed to absorb for the sake of peace." He rubbed his forehead. "He made a terrible decision." "More than once," I said. "Let us not keep dressing this up in the singular." Then came the line I knew was coming. "If you do this, it will follow him forever." I stared at him. "When I needed help buying my first car, you told me grown adults handled their own problems. When I was working overtime to save for this house, you told me struggle built character. So why does accountability only matter when it is me?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. There was no answer that did not expose everything. His last move was the oldest one in our family. He lowered his voice and said, "We are family." There it was, the magic word they only seemed to use when they wanted something from me. I pulled my phone from my pocket. "Family did not stop him from copying my key," I said. "Family did not stop him from walking into my bedroom. Family did not stop all of you from trying to move him into my home after he robbed me." I dialed the non-emergency police line while my father stood there listening. I gave my name, my address, and told the dispatcher I needed to report a burglary with video evidence, multiple entries, and a full inventory of stolen property. When I hung up, my father looked at me like I had become someone else entirely. That was fine. I finally had. 2 officers came by that same evening and I handed them everything. The clips, the inventory, the receipts, the timestamps, the screenshots of alerts on my phone, the list of serial numbers I had tracked down from old purchase emails. One of the officers, a woman with tired eyes and a voice that sounded like she had seen every kind of family mess possible, watched the hallway footage twice. "This is strong," she said. "Very strong." I told her I knew. She asked if I wanted to press charges, and I said yes before the question was even fully out of her mouth. I had spent too many years waiting for someone else in my family to do the right thing. I was done waiting. She explained the process, took the report, and told me cases with evidence this clean usually moved fast. Fast turned out to mean 48 hours. I was at work the morning it happened, sitting in a meeting about user testing feedback, when my phone buzzed 3 times in a row. The first text was from my mother. "How could you?" The second was from my father. "Call me now." The third was from my brother, and it was just a blurry photo of his own hands cuffed behind his back outside my parents' house. 2 neighbors were visible in the background, standing on their lawns and pretending not to stare. "Happy now," he wrote. I looked at the photo for a second longer than I should have. Not because I felt guilty. Because even then, even with metal around his wrists, he still thought the story was about my reaction instead of his choices. I turned my phone over and finished the meeting. My life kept moving. That was the part he never understood. My world did not revolve around his chaos anymore. On my way home, I called my father back. He answered immediately, voice tight and furious. They arrested him in front of the whole neighborhood. I kept my eyes on the road and said, "He robbed me while I was at work, and sat through dinner while you tried to move him into my house. I do not know what kind of private ending you expected." "Your mother is hysterical," he snapped. "Your mother was not hysterical when she told me to shut up," I said. He went silent. Then, very quietly, he said, "You are destroying this family." I laughed because by then the truth was almost relaxing. "No, Dad. I am just the first person in it who stopped lying." He hung up on me. That evening, his wife called. Her voice sounded scraped thin, like she had not slept since dinner. "I filed," she said. I did not need her to explain what she meant. "I filed for divorce this afternoon. The kids are with me." I closed my eyes for a second and leaned against my kitchen counter. "I am sorry," I said. "Do not be." She let out a tired breath. "I think I have been married to excuses, not a man." That stayed with me. Excuses, not a man. It fit too well. Over the next couple of weeks, the rest moved quickly because the evidence left very little room for drama in court, only consequences. He took a plea deal. 18 months probation, community service, full restitution of the stolen property plus court costs and fees. The total pushed past $11,000. My mother acted as if the fact that he avoided jail should make me grateful. I did not feel grateful. I felt finished. Finished with being told to think of his future when he had never once thought of mine. Finished with being treated like stability meant I owed unstable people access to everything I built. Finished with pretending my boundaries were cruelty just because other people did not like them. Then came the next layer of truth. 3 weeks after the arrest, my father called and asked me to come by the old house because there was something important we needed to discuss. I should have said no. I knew that the second I pulled into the driveway and saw my mother's face through the window, blotchy and red. But I went in anyway, because some part of me still hoped that maybe I was about to hear the words I had deserved for years. "We were wrong. I am sorry. We failed you." Instead, I walked into the kitchen and found papers spread across the table. Loan statements, past due notices, a yellow legal pad filled with numbers. My father slid one of the statements toward me. It was a home equity line of credit. $45,000. Opened almost 2 years earlier. 3 payments behind. I looked up slowly. "What is this?" My mother answered first because she could never sit inside silence when she was afraid. "We helped him." I looked back at the paper. $45,000 worth. My father cleared his throat. Some of it was credit card debt. Some of it was back rent. Some of it was after the layoff. And the rest, my mother said in a rush, was the lawyer and the bail. I leaned back in my chair and just stared at them. Even after everything, they had still done it. Still shoveled money into a fire and called it love. Still sacrificed themselves to keep him from feeling the full weight of what he had done. "The bank is threatening foreclosure," my father said. "We only need enough to catch up." There it was, the real reason I had been called. Not an apology, not accountability, a bill. I looked down at the statement again and felt that cold, clear stillness come back over me. It was the same feeling I had in the restaurant when I realized nobody at that table had invited me to a discussion. They had invited me to a surrender. My mother reached for my hand across the kitchen table, and I moved mine into my lap before she could grab it. "We are not asking for much," she said. "Just a loan until we get steady again." I let out one short breath through my nose. "A loan with what repayment plan? Dad, you are retired. Mom, you have not worked in years. He has probation fees, restitution, court costs, and still no stable job. Where exactly is the money supposed to come from? My father's jaw tightened. We are family, Natalie. I almost smiled when he said it, because of course he did. That word always showed up right on time whenever they needed me to ignore reality for their convenience. I looked him straight in the eye. When I was 26 and my car died right before I started a better job, you told me adults solve their own problems. When I was working nights and weekends to save for my down payment, you told me sacrifice built character. When I bought this house by myself, you called me independent. So tell me why independence is a virtue when it is me, but a punishment when it is him. My mother started crying again. Because you were always the one who could handle things. That answer hit exactly the way it always had. Not like praise, like permission to keep asking less of me and more from me at the same time. No, I said quietly. I was the one you were comfortable disappointing. My father sat back hard in his chair like I had slapped him. My mother covered her mouth. But I kept going because I was done softening the truth so they could survive hearing it. You called me strong every time you wanted me to accept less. You called him overwhelmed every time you wanted to excuse more. And now you want me to pour money into the hole you dug protecting a man who copied my key, stole from my bedroom, and sat there while all of you tried to move him into my home. My mother's tears turned louder. We could lose this house. I looked around the kitchen. Same cabinets, same dining room light, same place where every childhood holiday happened, same place where I learned, long before I had words for it, that competence in one child often becomes invisibility if the other child is needy enough. I knew what losing this house would mean to them. That did not change the answer. Then you should have let him fail years ago, I said. My father's face hardened in a way I had not seen since I was a teenager. So that is it. You are really going to let your parents lose their home. I stood up slowly, picked up my bag, and said the only honest thing left in the room. No, your son did that. My mother pushed back her chair and stood too, tears streaming down her face. If you walk out now, do not call yourself our daughter anymore. I looked at her for a long second. It hurt, but not in the old way. Not like a wound. More like an X-ray. Clean. Sharp. Exposing exactly what had always been there. Maybe you should have thought about that before asking your daughter to bankroll the son who robbed her, I said. Then I walked out. I made it all the way to my car before my hands started shaking. And even then, it was not guilt. It was anger. Not because I had said no. Because after all of it, they still believed the worst thing that had happened in this story was my refusal to rescue them. The fallout spread fast. Families like mine run on edited versions of the truth, so within days half my relatives knew I had refused to help my parents save their house, but only a handful knew why. My cousin texted me that people were calling me cold. My Aunt Denise called and said, "Let them talk." She had always been the only adult in the family who seemed immune to the emotional theater. She asked one question. Did they tell anyone about the HELOC? I laughed bitterly. Of course not. Then let me guess, she said. They left out the part where they borrowed against their own house to keep feeding him money and now want you to cover it. Exactly. Her answer came without hesitation. Then if anyone asks, I will tell them the truth. 2 days later, she did exactly that. Apparently, my mother tried to present me as heartless at a church luncheon, and Aunt Denise calmly asked in front of 3 other relatives whether Natalie was also supposed to pay for the $45,000 they took out to cover Ethan's debts, his bail, and his lawyer. According to my cousin, the room went quiet enough to hear forks hit plates. That was the first time the story started breaking in my favor. Once people heard actual numbers, actual facts, actual timelines, sympathy became a lot harder to hand to the wrong person. My brother did not come out looking tragic anymore. He came out looking exactly what he was, a grown man whose entire life had been padded by other people's sacrifices until the bill got too large to hide. My parents lasted a little while longer in the house, but not much. Between the HELOC, the missed payments, the legal costs, and all the money they had already burned trying to keep him afloat, they had no room left. Within 2 months, they sold it and moved into a cramped 2-bedroom apartment on the other side of town. And because this family had learned absolutely nothing, my brother moved in with them. 3 adults in one small apartment. My father sleeping badly. My mother crying more. My brother on the couch, jobless, angry, and still somehow acting like the victim of a story he had written with his own hands. I heard most of it through Aunt Denise and a cousin who had stopped pretending neutrality once the facts came out. My brother missed visits with his kids. His wife pushed for more custody. The court gave it to her because a man with probation, unstable housing, and a history of theft does not exactly look like a pillar of consistency. And every time I heard another update, I expected to feel something dramatic: vindication, satisfaction, pity. What I mostly felt was distance, like I had finally stepped outside a storm I had been living in so long I forgot not everybody calls chaos home. The family split happened quietly at first, then all at once. Some relatives stopped talking to me entirely, which honestly felt less like punishment and more like peace. Others kept sending those careful little messages people write when they want to sound wise without saying anything useful. Family is family. Life is short. You do not want regrets. Funny how nobody had sent those messages to my brother before he walked into my house with a copied key. The ones who actually knew the truth, really knew it, were the only ones whose opinions mattered to me at all. Aunt Denise stayed firmly in my corner. So did one of my cousins, who admitted he had spent years thinking Ethan was just unlucky until the arrest forced him to look at the pattern instead of the excuses. My mother hated that. She hated losing control of the family narrative even more than she hated losing the house. By then, though, too many people had seen enough to stop nodding along. Everyone knew about the HELOC. Everyone knew about the bail. Everyone knew he had stolen from me, and everyone knew my parents had still tried to place him in my home after that. Once the facts were all in the open, the story they had told about me being cruel started sounding ridiculous even to people who wanted to believe it. My brother, meanwhile, kept paying for his own choices in smaller, uglier ways that did not make headlines, but felt final all the same. He picked up contract work for a few weeks, then lost it. He complained probation meetings made it hard to keep a schedule, like the schedule had attacked him personally. He missed one supervised visit with his kids, then another. His wife took that straight back to court. By the time 6 months had passed, she had full legal and physical custody, and he was lucky to get updates. That was the part that should have broken him into honesty, but it did not. According to Aunt Denise, he mostly blamed me. Me for calling the police. Me for not giving him a place to stay. Me for ruining the last chance he supposedly had. As if his life had happened to him instead of through him. The strangest thing was how little power that blame had over me anymore. A year earlier, it would have kept me up at night. Now it just sounded like a man too weak to stand inside his own reflection. My life, outside of all that, had become almost embarrassingly calm. I worked. I slept well. I went to the gym again. I cooked on Sundays. I used the 3rd bedroom as a home office, and finally turned the small guest room into a workout space instead of leaving it empty for people who never came. I upgraded my security system, changed every lock, added face recognition alerts, and stopped apologizing for the fact that peace mattered to me more than appearances. Once in a while, I would think about that dinner and wonder how many years I had lost trying to be the reasonable one in a family that only liked reason when it protected the wrong people. Then, one Saturday afternoon, 6 months after the arrest, I ran into my mother at Kroger. We both froze near the produce section like strangers who recognized each other from another lifetime. She looked smaller than I remembered, tired in a way makeup cannot hide. I knew I did not look the same either. There is a kind of rest that changes your face when you stop carrying people who were never going to carry themselves. Natalie, she said softly. Mom. For a second, neither of us moved. Then she said, You look good. I gave her a small nod. Thanks. You too. It was a polite lie, but a necessary one. She glanced down at my cart, then back up at me. How is the house? Good, I said. Quiet, secure. No break-ins lately. She flinched, just a little. I deserve that, she said. Yeah, I answered. You did. That might have been the first honest exchange we had ever had without someone rushing in to soften it. She asked if we could talk sometime. I told her maybe, but not yet. She nodded like she had expected that answer. Then, after a pause, she said, He is working now. I looked at her carefully. Full-time. Hardware store. He hates it, but he shows up. Good, I said. She swallowed and looked away. We are in counseling. Financial counseling and family counseling. Your father, too. I said nothing, not because I wanted to punish her, because I was trying to figure out whether I felt anything at all. Finally, I asked, Is that because you finally understand what happened, or because losing everything got expensive? That one landed. She looked right at me, eyes shiny but dry this time. Both, she said. That was honest, too. I respected it more than all the crying. We stood there in the produce aisle with apples stacked between us like props in some suburban tragedy. And for the first time, I did not feel like a daughter trying to be chosen. I felt like a woman talking to another adult who had made catastrophic decisions and was only now learning what boundaries cost when you ignore them for too long. Before we parted, she said your brother asks about you sometimes. I adjusted my grip on the cart and said, Tell him I am fine. And tell him if he ever comes near my house again, the cameras are still recording. A tired, almost unwilling smile touched her mouth. I will, she said. Then we walked away in opposite directions, which felt fitting. Separate carts, separate lives, separate consequences. That night I came home, put the groceries away, and stood in my kitchen for a minute with the kind of quiet most people never understand until they almost lose it. The house felt like mine in a way it had not even before the theft. Not because it was untouched, but because I had finally defended it without apologizing. The next week, a letter arrived in my mailbox in my brother's handwriting. I almost threw it away unopened. Instead, I carried it inside, set it on the counter, made coffee, and waited until I felt nothing before I slid it open. The note was short. He said he was sorry, said he did not expect forgiveness, said he hated what his life had become and knew he had nobody to blame but himself, said he was trying to do better one day at a time. A year earlier, those words might have pulled something tender out of me. Now they just sat there on the page, neat and small, and too late. I folded the note once and put it in a drawer, not because it meant nothing, but because apologies are not the same thing as trust, and I was finally wise enough to know the difference. A few days later, my father sent an email. It was longer, more direct. He said he was not asking for forgiveness. He said he and my mother were trying to understand how badly they had failed both of their children, one by rescuing him until he never grew up, and the other by leaning on her until she learned not to need them at all. He said counseling had forced him to admit things he should have admitted 20 years earlier, that he had confused protecting his son with loving him, that he had called me strong whenever it was convenient to leave me unsupported, that what happened to me should never have happened, and what they asked of me afterward was worse. I read that email twice. Then I closed my laptop and sat there with my hand over the lid. It did not fix anything. It did not erase dinner at the restaurant or my mother telling me to shut up, or the feeling of watching my brother walk through my house on camera like a stranger wearing family's face. But it was real. More real than anything either of them had said when the damage was still fresh. I did not answer right away. Maybe part of growing up is understanding that immediate responses are overrated. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is leave a truth sitting where it lands and let it be heavy. Over the next few months, I heard little updates through Aunt Denise. My brother kept the job. My parents did not let him move back in after he left the apartment he briefly rented with a friend. My mother had stopped crying every time his name came up and started asking harder questions instead. My father had become almost rigid about money. Apparently, consequences had finally taught the lesson love never managed to. As for me, I kept living. I painted the guest room. I bought a walking pad for my office. I started inviting friends over without feeling that old shame I used to carry about protecting my space too fiercely. The truth was, my boundaries had never been the problem. They were the solution I should have trusted sooner. That is the lesson I wish more people understood. Family is not a free pass to disrespect your home, your money, your peace, or your safety. Love does not mean unlimited access. Compassion does not mean becoming the emergency fund for people who refuse to change. And protecting yourself is not cruelty, even when the people benefiting from your silence call it that. Sometimes the most educational thing a family can witness is one person finally saying no and meaning it. Sometimes the healthiest example children can see is an adult refusing to excuse harmful behavior just because it came from someone related to them. Sometimes keeping evidence, telling the truth, and stepping back is not revenge at all. It is responsibility. It is self-respect. It is the first honest boundary in a system built on guilt. I still live in my townhouse. One bedroom for sleep, one for work, one for the life I choose. The cameras are still there. The locks are stronger. The house is quieter than ever. And maybe that is the most satisfying ending of all. Not that everyone who hurt me suffered, though many of them did. Not that they finally admitted I was right, though some of them have. It is that I no longer need their version of justice to feel whole. I built a life they could not bully their way into, and I kept it. That matters more than any apology ever could. If you have ever had to say no to family just to protect your own peace, then you already know how lonely that choice can feel in the moment and how life-changing it becomes once the noise dies down. So tell me honestly, have you ever had to become the villain in someone else's story just to stop abandoning yourself in your own?